Hi, Todd VanDenburg here with VanDenburg Capital Management and another Uncommon Sense update. So we're just a few days away from the end of June. Hard to believe the first half of 2023 is almost over. Man, how time flies. Um, uh, June's a pretty good month so far. It was better about 10 days ago, but still pretty good. We're well ahead of where we started the month. And, we don't really expect in the next couple of days anything, earth shattering to cause the markets to collapse. So we expect June to be a good month. But that's not what I wanted to talk about today. What I want to talk about today is something that sort of, I don't know, fell off everybody's radar as soon as the debt ceiling limit was increased. And just to take you back, the news was just filled last month with, the debt ceiling needs to be raised, or the U.S. government's going to default on its debt, and that would be horrific for the economy and for the country, and blah blah blah. And then Congress got together and the president, and they agreed to basically suspend the debt ceiling until after the presidential election next year. In effect, giving the government a blank check. There is no debt ceiling anymore until after the presidential election, which seems a little chicken, to me. But in any case, that's what they did. Um, and and those actions have some implications, and I want to talk about those. So the number one thing that has me scratching my head about the blind increase in the debt ceiling has to do with the interest payments that we're making on our debt. Now, the national debt's almost $32 trillion. Hard to believe. It's just shocking. It just continues to grow at such an accelerated rate that it's almost funny money at this point. People don't even worry about 32 trillion. But there's a real problem with that, and that is the interest payment on the debt. So just a couple of years ago, the average interest that the U.S. government paid on its debt was about 1.6-ish%. And the reason for that is because over the last decade, interest rates have been at zero, and the federal government has been able to refinance older debt from the 80s and the 90s that was at much higher interest rates at next to nothing. Well, that's not the case anymore. Just in the last 2 years, the average interest rate on our debt has gone from about 1.6 to 2.67. That's a pretty significant percentage increase. And as a result, the interest payments that we have to make on our debt every year have risen from about $420 billion a year up to, we're approaching $1 trillion a year of interest that gets paid on our national debt. And the Federal Reserve has come out and said, look, we're probably going to raise interest rates a couple of more times because they're trying to keep, to get inflation back down to 2%. And if they do, we still have debt that's maturing, because during the last 10 years, when interest rates were almost zero, instead of the federal government refinancing its debt for the longest possible maturities, they didn't do that. They erred on the side of shorter maturities so that they could get the lowest possible interest rates. And as a result, we have a lot of our debt coming to maturity over the next 5 years, and all of that's going to be refinanced at higher interest rates. So I expect to see the average interest that we pay on our debt get into the mid 3%, 3.5%, in the not too distant future, which means that the amount of interest that we pay on our debt is probably going to go to 1.5 trillion. And the reason that that's a problem is, the government, this is sort of a vicious cycle, right? Is if the interest payment on our debt is a $1.5 trillion, that means that there's that much less money for the government to spend if it wants to balance its budget. And since they don't seem to want to balance the budget, Then they just borrow even more, which they have to borrow at higher interest rates now, which just makes that interest payment on the debt go even higher. And it's this sort of vicious cycle until we can actually get some people into Congress that will balance the budget. And however they choose to do it, the different political parties have, their priorities. There is no doubt that sometime in the next 5-ish, maybe 10 years, that the interest payment that we make on our debt is going to consume so much of federal revenue that we're going to have to start doing without some government services. So the sooner that they start to get their fiscal house in order, the less pain we're going to experience. Now, to be clear, I'm not talking about Social Security, cuts in Social Security, Medicare, that kind of stuff, because those are actually separate accounts that have their own issues, and I'm not going to go into those today. But I'm just talking about things like, government spending, the military, all kinds of different programs that the government seems to, spend just tons and tons of money on, that many might argue are of debatable value. All of those programs are going to have to be looked at. So I'm raising this to your attention, not because it's an issue right now, right? Our feet are not on fire. So we're just walking blindly ahead, but there's a fire ahead. And if we don't start doing something, if we don't get our elected officials to start doing something, then over the next 5 to 10 years, we could find ourselves in a place where really dramatic changes to what our federal government does would have to happen, because we just can't continue to borrow more and more money. It's becoming problematic. I mean, we're at the point now, again, with almost $1 trillion of interest payment on the debt. Roughly 20% of all federal revenue is spent on just the interest payment, and that's a lot. It's too much. So again, not trying to scare anybody. We're not in imminent danger of economic collapse, but if we're not looking ahead, if we're not looking far enough ahead, we could stumble into these problems and not be prepared. Now, there actually is a silver lining to this dark cloud, and that is, with interest rates higher, we're actually able to get like really high quality fixed income now that we haven't seen in 10 or more years. Just there's some money market accounts that you can get almost 5% on. I have people calling me up and saying, hey, my bank has got a 5% 6-month CD, and I'm like, yeah, take it. I mean, it's 5%. I mean, for the better part of a decade, we were earning 0.1, 0.2, and now we're earning 5%. So for people who maybe are in retirement and would like some nice, safe, stable income and not have all their money be in the market, these higher interest rates are at least helping some, and they need to help because inflation, over the last 2 years, prices have gone up roughly 15%. We're running at about a 4% inflation right now. So maybe over a 3-year time period, prices will have gone up almost 20%. So inflation's a real problem. And if you don't have something that can provide you with stable, high quality and high yielding income, inflation just eats you alive. So we're at least at the point now where on cash, you can earn a little more than the current inflation rate, which is a good thing. So in any case, don't be alarmed, but be aware that there are problems ahead if we don't get our elected officials to do something about them. So if anybody has any questions about this or any other financial matter, please just send me a message, post a comment to this update, give me a call. I'm always available, and I love answering questions. So That was your update. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, give us a like, give us a share, and I'll be back again soon with another Uncommon Sense update. Thank you for watching.
If you'd like to be the first to hear of more Uncommon Sense updates like these, please click the subscribe button below. We'd really appreciate it. Thanks again.